Greetings, everyone. It is a nice cloudy morning here in southeast Georgia, coming off a pretty decent weekend. Just a little bit of heavy showers. Really Friday, Saturday. It was pretty nice yesterday. Maybe go on a nice afternoon walk and not have to worry about the torrential downpour that is late July through August here in southeast. But, that's just the weather. That's just the climate. It was a good time. I'm sure y'all saw Friday. Trump and Putin got to hold hands down the red carpet. They looked very longingly into each other's eyes, like two lovers who hadn't seen each other in 7 years. But nothing really came out of that from what it seems. Not that anything would come out of it in the short term like I and many other people predicted. Luckily, it doesn't seem like it's the worst case scenario, which I feared, which would have been that Trump and Putin agree to a deal without Ukraine there and then basically force Ukraine or the Ukrainian government into either accepting this really harsh truce peace plan, or the Ukrainian government, not doing it at all, or being offered such a plan and then refusing to do it because it just is brutal. Huge swaths of lands going away, huge amounts of people being turned over to the Russian government, and basically mass refugee immigration having to happen, which then would put more stress on the Ukrainian-American relationship and ultimately the Ukrainian defenses over the next decade, let alone the next 3 months. But there's always time for the latter to happen, so we'll see what happens. But let's get into the news. I think they might be in a commercial break, a self-promotion break, as public radio needs to do, because they have always gotten their money from the people and local businesses. And by local, usually wherever their headquarters is, so for GPB, it's up in Atlanta. And with the cutting to public funding, they need it more than ever. So I don't blame them when they do it.
Planning ahead with Georgia Farm Bureau Insurance.
As I said, insurance company.
Focused on exceptional service. Georgia Farm Bureau never drops the ball. And Georgia State University, GPB Atlanta is licensed to Georgia State University, ranked among the top universities in the nation in commitment to undergraduate teaching. More information is available at gsu.edu. It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Layla Falded in Washington, D.C.
Jeremy Martinez in Los Angeles.
Apologize if the sun shines in your eyes.
With former White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan about potential next steps to end the war in Ukraine. But first, following his meeting with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, President Trump is hosting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House today.
Joining him will be several key European leaders in a united front for a meeting that could shape Ukraine's future. Trump is expected to lean on Ukraine to take a deal that involves giving up territory, possibly Crimea. He may also insist that Zelensky give up any hope of Ukraine ever joining NATO.
NPR White House correspondent Franco Ordonez has been covering the story. So, Franco, that scenario that Little just described, giving up Crimea and NATO membership, is what Trump posted last night on Truth Social. How much do you think that's going to hang over today's meeting between the two?
I mean, a lot. I mean, it really speaks to the big issues that need to be worked out, and there's some real sticky ones, like land swaps, like possibly Crimea, and another is security guarantees to prevent Russia from invading again. And let's also
that's really the ultimate thing that needs to be worked out.
It was really a disaster. He was lectured by the vice president, lectured by the president, and this time Zelensky will be joined by, among others, European Union Chief Ursula von der Leyen, French President Emmanuel Macron, and the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. And this kind of united front is partially an effort to prevent a repeat of that last meeting, but it's also to make sure that Europe has a voice in these negotiations, especially after Zelensky was not invited to that Alaska summit between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Just keep hands out of there. Fucking
that's what there. Trump has shifted his positions after meeting with Putin. Before, Trump insisted that the next step needed to be a ceasefire. He didn't get that, and now he's actually saying that the best way to end the conflict is to go directly to a peace agreement, which is Putin's preferred position. So the European leaders want to prevent Trump from forcing more of Putin's positions on Ukraine.
How is the Trump administration responding to these concerns?
As you can imagine, they're pushing back. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was on CBS's Face the Nation yesterday, roundly dismissing the idea that the leaders were coming to protect Zelensky.
They're not coming here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied. They're coming here tomorrow to keep working with the European. He talked to them last week.
And Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, said on CNN's State of the Union, the U.S. is working on concessions from Russia, security guarantees, and in his words, would be game-changing.
We were able to win the following concession: that the United States could offer Article 5-like protection, which is one of the real reasons why Ukraine wants to be in NATO.
He's referring to Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which says that an attack against one of its members is considered an attack on all. To be sure, Russia has not said this publicly, but that is significant because it would be a shift in position by the Trump administration.
Yeah, Article 5-like isn't Article 5. We'll see how it goes. Now, speaking of land swaps specific, what do you make of
basically useless.
That Zelensky can end the war if Ukraine gives up Crimea and agrees never to join NATO?
Yeah, I think off the start he's making clear that he's going to lean on Zelensky to make some uncomfortable choices. Something Zelensky won't do, or says he won't do. But the NATO thing speaks to Witkoff, what Witkoff was saying, NATO membership, but maybe NATO-like guarantees. I mean, it's a complicated workaround, and that's why the details are so important. A lot really needs to be hashed out.
That's White House correspondent Franco Ordonez. Franco, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ed.
For more on what to expect from the big meeting today at the White House, we are joined by Jake Sullivan. He served as a national security advisor to former President.
Ultimately, that is what Ukraine needs: is
Thank you for having me.
security alliances and security guarantees that go beyond what they had from America, over the 2000s and the 2010s. Because
Well, look, taking a step back,
I mean, ultimately, if Ukraine had better security guarantees, especially over the 10s, this would have never happened, right?
Looking for a true peace agreement.
What are you doing? Oh my God, he's trying to get a wreck.
It's interesting to me that there was more nervousness around Zelensky.
People trying to pass each other on a merge lane is insane. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. But let's get back to Sullivan.
Effectively, out of Alaska, when President Trump flipped his position and said he's no longer looking for a ceasefire, he will no longer impose consequences on Russia. Instead, he's going to put all the pressure on Zelensky, and I think that this is playing into Vladimir Putin's hands.
What did you make of that meeting, the U.S. president meeting Russia's President Vladimir Putin on U.S. soil? It's something Biden wouldn't do.
Look, meeting with a foreign head of state to try to solve a war, this is not a bad thing, but it's got to be properly prepared, and a president has to know what he's trying to achieve. President Trump told us what he was trying to achieve. He was trying to achieve an end to the fighting, and in the absence of an end to the fighting, he said that he was going to impose significant sanctions on Russia. After the meeting, he came out and basically said, actually, I agree with President Putin. We don't need a ceasefire. We should just keep negotiating towards a peace agreement while Russia gets to continue to bombard Russia, and I'm not going to impose consequences on Russia. That's a big win for Vladimir Putin, and I think a setback for the U.S. effort to bring about a true peace in Ukraine.
What about this concession they say they did get, that they could offer security guarantees to prevent Russia from attacking again, something they say Putin has agreed to, and they called it game-changing?
Well, security guarantees are absolutely essential because over the long term, what Putin really wants is the subjugation of Ukraine. So ensuring that Ukraine has the means to deter a future Russian invasion is vital to ensuring a peace. But the fine point really matters. Russia has previously offered security guarantees to Ukraine and said that would be an acceptable part of the outcome. But critically, it said it would be part of those security guarantees alongside the United States. That's what it said back in 2022.
Which is kind of
is it
ridiculous.
actually
Makes no
offering
sense.
real security guarantees or accepting real security guarantees provided by the United States.
The robber will provide security guarantees. That's just the mob at that point.
That means this isn't a serious proposal. We don't know yet. Knowing Vladimir Putin, my guess is that in the fine print, Russia is seeking to continue to destabilize and undermine Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and it is vital that the United States nails this down before going out to tap progress.
Now, look, Jake, this war has been going on for 3.5 years. You worked with it under the Biden administration to try to end it, and nothing has worked. During your time, sanctions didn't work, threats didn't work, deadlines didn't work. Russia kept taking land, and now Ukraine is at risk of losing 20% of its territory. Did Biden and now Trump get this wrong when Russia experts say Putin will only be forced into concession with the threat of true military defeat, and U.S. and European allies help Ukraine fight but not really defeat Russia?
Well, President Biden took the position, which President Trump has also taken, that the United States will not directly enter the war against Russia with American forces on the ground. I think that was the right call then. I think it's the right call now. But pressure does work. Why did Putin come to Alaska? He came to Alaska because he was worried that President Trump was going to increase economic sanctions, especially on oil, against Russia, and he wants to avoid that.
So he
and
did his little talk, and as Trump has shown every single time before that, is that if he makes an economic threat against Russia and Russia's allies, if Russia gives a little bit of meat, and by that I mean just agrees to talk, all those economic pressures go away. This is just a repeat of the sanctions. So unless we really see those sanctions actually go in on India and on other buyers of Russian oil, it's not going to matter.
Now is the moment, in my view, to really tighten the pressure, especially with oil prices being where they are globally.
As this guy
that is going to get Putin's attention. We saw that in Alaska. President Trump had an instinct for that. Now we need to follow through on it.
That's former National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
On the morning of President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin's Friday meeting in Alaska, State Department documents were left behind in the printer of a nearby hotel.
Oh my
Carol
God.
Eisner of NPR's investigations team first reported on the discovery and has more.
And 8 pages of documents produced by the U.S. State Department that were found at around 9 a.m. Friday morning.
These fucking
by
chumps
guests
are
on
such a
printer
joke.
And the hotel Captain Cook. The business center where they appear to have been printed is located in the public lobby of the 4-star hotel, which is about 20 minutes from the U.S. base in Anchorage, where Trump and Putin met. The first 5 pages show the exact rooms on the U.S. military base where the leaders were scheduled to meet, and include the names of all the Russian and U.S. representatives who would be present.
These guys have no operational security
skills.
skills.
Numbers of 3 U.S. staffers assisting with the meetings,
God.
and indicated Trump planned to give Putin a gift, a desk statue of a bald eagle. The last 3 pages showed information about lunch. Menus for the meal the leaders were meant to share indicate that the luncheon was to be held, quote, in honor of His Excellency Vladimir Putin, end quote, and that a simple 3-course menu had been planned with entrees of filet mignon and halibut Olympia, and a dessert of creme brulee. The lunch was ultimately canceled, but the documents show the planned seating chart with Putin and Trump sitting across from each other and flanked by cabinet members and aides. On Saturday, the White House dismissed all the pages in the packet as a, quote, multi-page lunch menu and said leaving them in a public place was not a security breach. Don Michaels is a law professor at UCLA who lectures about national security. He said that leaving U.S. documents like that on a public printer demonstrated incompetence.
Yes.
It's probably a breach of protocol. You just don't leave things on public printers ever.
Michaels
You
said
don't use
the
public
incident fits a
printers.
pattern for the Trump administration, following a breach of security in March, when top Defense Department officials inadvertently invited a journalist into a chat about impending U.S. military strikes in Yemen. Kiara Eisner, NPR News.
Oh my
You can see all
God.
the documents online at npr.org.
Dude,
This is NPR
that's
News.
journalism right there. That's actual journalism. Thank you, NPR, for being one of the last bastions of journalism. Even though y'all bend to political will more than I'd like y'all. Oh my God, that is absolutely crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the signal thing again. Definitely not to the same extent. Definitely not to the same extent. It's not like they were having, they weren't sharing the flight plan of Air Force One or the other envoys or the Russian envoys into Alaska, or the security motorcades or the patrol paths of local police and military police or anything like that. It's a simple thing. Yeah, it's a menu. It's political strategy to make Vladimir Putin feel warm and fuzzy on American soil. But like, it's one of those things of like, if you're slipping up at the basics, right? If you don't show the proper respect for the little things, it's going to cause a huge mess up when it's something big. Because it's just one of those things of like, it's like driving. A lot of what you do is automatic. You don't really think about it. You kind of just react and go. So if you don't use your blinker, every time you change lanes or you take a right on a red light, that's a very important habit. And maybe you'll have a close call and it won't matter this time. But if you don't learn from that close call, you're going to not have a close call, 2 times after that, and it's going to be a real wreck, and you're going to get yourself hurt or get someone else hurt. Ultimately, I have no respect for the current administration. So, but it just shows a complete lack of discipline of the people who are working right now, and it's just disgusting. It's going to end up hurting someone more important.
Original drama based on the standard.
It's going to end up hurting someone way more important, or just a person who's actually trying to do the right thing in a not so right organization. God, crazy.
John Lee Anderson is 68 and has seen a lot of the world, which is his job as a foreign correspondent for the New Yorker magazine.
For me, the world is an adventure. I'm amazed by the tapestry of humankind in all of its variations. I feel like a kid, thrilled and delighted when I get the chance to go somewhere I've never been.
Readers find Anderson in some of the most hazardous places on Earth, and for decades that has included Afghanistan.
Here's a country that I've known since I was a young man.
He visited in the 1980s as rebels were driving occupying forces of the Soviet Union out of the country. Later, Afghanistan fell into civil war. The Taliban took over and hosted Osama bin Laden. Anderson returned just after the 9/11 attacks in 2001, which is when I met him there. An American in a war zone, walking around in an Afghan hat called a Bacol and seeming entirely comfortable in his surroundings. Anderson covered a 20-year American occupation and its disastrous end. He collected his writings in a new book called To Lose a War:
At least
The
it
Fall
ended.
and Rise of the Taliban.
You can still be over there with
late 2021,
non-CIA
soon after the last
forces.
Americans had evacuated.
After 20 years of Western international presence there, I found myself back in the capital city of this country, virtually the only foreigner. I mean, there were probably a handful of others, but I didn't see them. And the authorities on the street were the Taliban, the people who'd been in the hills all these years fighting that international coalition. And the modern ways of life that it had brought about and tried to instill in the capital, it was bewildering because they looked like Taliban, they were Taliban, they really didn't know the modern world, and yet they had access like kids and young people and people everywhere to smartphones. And they were the new authorities, and the people of Kabul, by and large, had tried to forestall punishment by the Taliban by, say, painting over faces if they had them on ads in their shop windows, or the girls now had them wearing burqas. Still weren't wearing burqas, but they had them on veils. They were trying to be a little more conservative just in case. And there was a kind of sidelong glances. There was no really overt repression yet, but you had a sense that the shoe was going to drop at any minute.
Instead, it's been this step-by-step process. Girls were banned from lower grades, then banned from high schools, and a little time passed, and then they were kept out of universities. It's step-by-step.
That's right. And in one of the last edicts, one of the most mind-numbing of all, which is that they'd already been banned, as you know, from leaving their homes, many of which are like fortresses, right? Unless they were accompanied by a male relative. And now they were banned from speaking out loud. They cannot speak.
That's
What is
insane.
life like for people, male or female, who in some way cooperated with the U.S.-led government and then did not make it out of Afghanistan in 2021?
It's become increasingly more difficult. So one of the world's poorest countries, with I think half the population in need of food assistance, is now in a situation where it's not only been cut off from all international credits. President Trump has cut off humanitarian assistance. It's not in a good place at all.
I try to think of what remains of the decades-old U.S. presence in Afghanistan. And listening to you, I hear some of the things are military uniforms, vehicles, weapons, and smartphones.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that remains?
The memory of what was briefly. I have to say, I never expected to find myself thinking this, much less saying it, but the Soviets, the Russians, when they were there, they killed a lot of Afghans, many more than the 20 years that the American and native presence did. At least 2 million, they say. In my travels through the countryside of Afghanistan back in those days, I didn't see an intact house. Bombs were everywhere, exploded or unexploded. It was a devastated country. And yet, Kabul itself, under the Soviets, flourished. And they actually did social housing, construction, and they educated tens of thousands of Afghans. The Americans didn't build anything.
Yeah.
They built their own bases. They brought the free market. So Kabul today looks
At least the
very
commies
different to how it looked
built up the
2001.
city. That's what he's
There's all
saying.
these gaudy wedding palaces. There was the narco mansions of the drug lords who were, frankly speaking, allowed to flourish in the first part of the involvement there, because they sided with the West in fighting the Taliban. And plenty of cars, but there's not really a group of buildings, housing, hospitals, or much else in the way of infrastructure, modern infrastructure, that people can point to and say the Americans did that. It's quite sad, I think.
Are you saying the Soviets, as awful as they were for Afghanistan, left a more lasting impression than the Americans did?
I would say the jury's out, but they left behind
Maybe
an
a positive
educated class of people and
impression.
infrastructure that we did not leave. I mean, extraordinary expenditures, but it kind of went back to our own businesses and to the contractors, and all of these bases were almost, I sometimes felt that I was visiting kind of like a battleship America that was floating just above the Afghan ground, but never quite touching it.
When you travel to some of the radically different places that you travel, you report one day from Venezuela, say, and another day from Afghanistan, and another day from Chechnya, or any number of other places. Are there themes that emerge about war, about conflict, about government, or about human nature?
What I see as a symmetry around the world in all these places that you've mentioned is that at any time, in any place, and in every culture, if there is a group of people, let's call it a nation state or a society, that feels itself to be, rightly or wrongly, discriminated against, ostracized, marginalized, repressed, and they have no recourse legally through civic expression to redeem themselves or feel freer, they will eventually resort to violence. To me, that is a maxim of humankind.
The latest book by John Lee Anderson is Stories of War, The Fall and Rise of the Taliban. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me.
We'll leave it there for the day. I mean, that's a very interesting point that the guy made was, at least, the Soviets, the commies, if you want to be a little bit more derogatory, when they occupied Afghanistan, their ideals led them to at least improving society in some respects. Not all, of course. An occupying force is going to have pretty deleterious effects, and we've seen that all throughout history, whether that's through economic oppression, through murder, through racial oppression, the enforcement or buildup of caste systems. That level of imperialism is ultimately never good. It's better to build through, diplomacy. Sorry, I'm trying to get my thoughts together. It's better to it's better to work through diplomacy to spread your ideals and to make the world a better place instead of, putting people under the gun. But the ideals of the Soviets was to build, social societies where the state provided equality, the state provided education, and the state provided medicine, right? While here in the Western world in America, the ideals of the state is to make as much money as possible for those who are already wealthy and powerful. So if you want to think of it on like an ideological goal of what was the difference in the ideological goals of the Soviet Afghani war and the US Afghani war, Soviets, they wanted a strong socialist stronghold in the Middle East with oil, or not oil themselves, but access to other oil company or oil producing countries. And they wanted to spread the ideas of socialism, right? Which I've already said. While the American Afghani war was in response to a terrorist attack, but the ultimate ideals of it was to get as much money for Halliburton, for Lockheed Martin, for DRS. The amount of Afghanis who live there, who die, damn the amount of Afghanis who become homeless and impoverished, and damn the amount of Americans who were whipped up in the flurry of post 9/11 hysteria to go die in that country or die in surrounding countries while we were transporting military goods or doing humanitarian work that was not humanitarian whatsoever. So it's something you really got to put some thought towards of like, what are the ultimate goals of your society? And you really do see it on a foreign level, even under imperial occupation, what that difference is. And ultimately, I do not want imperialism anywhere. I think it's wrong. I think it causes more harm than good, and ultimately it causes an increase in human suffering. But we'll leave it there for the day. Kind of a crazy note to leave off on, but very important, very interesting. Definitely left off a little longer on this one, but I think it was important to really put some thought to it. and to listen to that. So I hope y'all enjoy your Monday. Have a good one. Catch y'all later.